Hi, friends. Host Eric here. Talking with 50 people. I'm here with Becky, Susie, Abraham, Anthony, and of course, the one, the only, the guy whose name is super racy, Spacey. The question was posed by Wiz Sauce, which I wanted to make a public video about, is what, and it's a great question for a 17-year-old to ask, is what problems ought I anticipate being Fi PoLR bringing to me in my life? Maybe he can, obviate them if he can get ahead of it or something. So in this room, we've got two people who are Fi PoLR. Neither of them are ESTPs, but then we've got people who know both of us. So we've got Kimberly and Susie and Abraham and Spacey and Anthony. And they all know Becky and me both. So they can say what it looks like from an external perspective, and we can say what it looks like from an internal perspective. And I'm older than Becky, so I can say what it's like at 50, and she can say what it's like at 26 or whatever she is. Okay. Let's start with you, Becky. What do you think problems have arisen from Fi PoLR?
Okay. So for the most part, it's non-problematic for me in that I don't get to notice the disadvantages that I probably experience as a result of being Fi PoLR. The one that's most prominent to my awareness is never knowing how to gauge or where to gauge how someone feels about me. So I have certain indications that I can make insofar as if the communication is pleasant and if the communication is sought for, that's to say that someone is seeking me regularly to some extent, or there's a mutual seeking of each other. That's like a logical indication to me that we're friends. But in terms of understanding how someone feels about me in any given situation or time, I have no fucking clue unless they tell me. And I think that that's like the most primal disadvantage that's experienced as an Fi PoLR person.
Yeah, I want to sort of second that notion as well, that one thing that I think probably Becky and I both do is get easily distracted by someone else, right? And it's not a commentary on the person that we have had before in our lives, whatever that might be, It's just a commentary on, and the thing is, the SI aspect of it is stronger in us than would be inferred from that behavior. In reality, we're more attached to the people we get attached to than they or even we think we are. And as time passes and we remain close to those people, the attachments grow more binding in some regard. Because the SI means that's replacing the Fi, basically. Our experience with the person and knowing that they've been there with us before and they've done stuff with us before and they've been reliable before, or we've been able to count on them. They haven't let us down in some sense before. Those things, if they've hooked us up before or helped us out before, especially if we really needed it, then that's something we're definitely not going to forget. Regardless, it's true what you're saying that I don't know how other people feel about me either. I don't know. It's a weird question to even ask for me to try to get the answer to, is how important am I to this other person? The only way I can calculate is in terms of my utility to them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's turn to Susie next. You've known me for a long time, Susie, and you've known Becky for probably longer than I've known Becky, I bet. What?
I also have a younger brother who's an ENTP, and I was in a relationship with an ESTP for 11 years. So it seems like to be right that you say that your understanding is of a very practical nature, opposed to introverted feeling, which is pretty much the TI of interpersonal relations, if you're gonna simplify it. So you guys don't see that. You're just blind. And what happens is that people around you will assume you have the same ability they do to just implicitly know this is the status of our relation and this is the comfort and social understanding of the relationship, where in reality you guys aren't even looking at the same thing.
Definitely.
One problem that might arise then is there's a it's not intended, like, we understand the dynamics of it, but there's something that's going to play like a blind presumption of a closeness that doesn't exist yet. Like, ENTPs typically come on strong, like come on open and strong, not strong like forceful in any sense, but all of a sudden, you kind of act with me like I'm your old friend, even though we just met. There's that quality, I think, to ENTPs, and it's more revelatory of how little we understand the distinction between relationship depths than it is of some sort of social grace.
Additionally, I think that the ESTP would have somewhat of an easier time than that, because they can actually feel, to an extent, the power dynamic in a room. So they're going to know their position physically better than we are going to.
I agree. They engage with a physical level of FE on a more successful level. Abraham, you got something to say about polar FI?
My brother is an ESTP, and my dad is an ISFP. And so what happens sometimes at my house is that my dad will tell me in some way, form, communicate to me, your brother has hurt my feelings. And he did it in such a banged out way, and I don't think he realized he hurt my feelings. And then so what I take from that is I think as an ESTP, he doesn't really know when he's doing it. And so I don't know. It's just interesting to see how sometimes ESTP will communicate and it will come off as really bad, and he's completely polar to be able to see what he's doing to people's emotions.
Yeah. Another thing I thought is that it's not all bad. Like the thing you say about the practical understanding and just meeting someone new, and you don't really need to establish much FI-wise to start interacting friendly, for example. So it's not all bad.
Right. Well, I want to point out also that Abraham's brother is not a particularly healthy ESTP, so let's not get too. I mean, he's not. Let's forget that. Let me retract that statement. He's not a model ESTP.
So something that's worth saying as well is that I think that we get hurt on principle. So we're hurt when the logic states that there is reason to be hurt, or at least that's when we realize to acknowledge it. And therefore, one of the things that an FI polar person is going to have to, account for good interpersonal relationships is that, number one, they don't get to decide when someone else is hurt. And number two, the manner at which we go about determining what it is to be hurt is with one frame of judgment. It's not with both frames of judgment. And thereby, even if it doesn't make sense to you, what the person is expressing about your effect on them as it relates to their feelings, you have to come with, the understanding that although some people will take advantage of that, most people are not actively aware of your FI polar. And so you should take more mind into trying to understand where they're coming from when it doesn't make sense to you.
Yeah, well, Kimberly, do you have anything to add about FI polar as you've seen it in me? You're the one who classically said to me one day, you only have one emotion, you just push it around to different places. And I thought, well, that's an awfully nice turn of phrase. What else do you have to say about it?
Well, I really struggle with your FI polar. I don't know how to.
All right.
Don't put me on the spot.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. I think I have something.
Go ahead, Spacey.
So it seems like people are talking a lot about the interpersonal aspects of FI polar. One thing I've noticed though is that you're gonna want to look inside yourself, pay attention to yourself, because in the same way that they're unaware of all these things about other people, they're unaware of those same exact things within themselves, and they'll end up in this situation. I should say as an INTP that eight slot FI, I think, results in a similar kind of thing where we're kind of unaware of the FI influence going on in our minds. But it seems like ENTPs are much more likely to be in this state of mind where they're fully convinced that they're being completely logical, even as they're obviously very emotional at the time.
Because unless we are so emotional as to embrace, I mean, there's never going to be a case where we're actively embracing a line of argumentation that doesn't hold water. So if we're doing that, then you're right, sure. Now, what does happen is this. If I'm totally engaged with my FI, I say, I don't want to talk about this. This is a clear, bright line. You will accept my version of it, and that's it. And I don't want to justify it, and I don't want to explain it at all. Now, that's not giving a bad argument. That's accurately describing what I'm going through right there. I'm saying, I don't want to have a discussion about this. I don't want to go back and forth about it. I don't want to justify it because my FI is engaged. I want you to agree with me or shut your mouth.
So a tip that I learned, kind of picking up on what Spacey was saying, is that if you don't, as an FI polar person, and I think this is probably more true for us ENTPs than ESTPs, but I'll say it anyway. Sorry, I don't know. Okay. Anyway, if you're not sure, if you're not sure about your own boundaries, in the sense that you have no physical indication that a boundary is being breached, you're not going to have an emotional one. So it's good to try different ways to learn what physical signs you might get. An example for me, I've learned that if someone I'm not familiar with is too close in my space, I'll feel something in my neck. Now, that took guidance from someone else to even learn. Prior to that, I had no indication of anything of the sort. And so I think that in discovering those sorts of things, you've kind of get little tells that otherwise you would not have, which can prevent conflict down the road, because you can start to say, oh, wait, this physical thing happened. I should look into what that meant.
I would add there's a couple other quick ways to get to understand your own emotions, what they are better. Number one, it's the thing your rationality is arguing against. So when you're saying to yourself, no, Eric, or Wiz Sauce, I don't know if you refer to yourself as Wiz Sauce in your own head. I'm assuming you do. And so you get up in the morning and you say, good morning, Wiz Sauce, to yourself, and then you say, you know, Wiz Sauce, are you sure that you should really be this mad at those people? Because here's some reasons why you're really at fault. Here's ways you can blame yourself. The person that's arguing you should be mad at those people, that's one of your emotions.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one way to find them. And the other way is if you just look at I forgot what the other way is now. I lost my train of thought, I guess. I just forgot what it was.
A really good analogy you came up with was the big stone versus the tiny pebbles. And I think sharing that analogy could be useful.
Could you do that for me? Could you please?
To the best of my memory, sure. So essentially, a person who has Fi in their stack somewhere that's not polar is going to have a big stone. The more you value Fi, that's to say, the more it's in your conscious stack or even your dominant function, let's say, the bigger your stone is. In contrast, the Fi polar person has tiny pebbles. And so the stone of the person who values Fi, it responds to other people. It responds to things that they like and dislike, and it heats up very fast, and then it goes down, and as it goes down, their mood will change as well. Whereas with us, it's these pebbles that respond to the heat but dissipate just as quickly because it's not contained to one spot.
And the other key element of this is linking to a person. When a person comes near you, you have a stone for them, basically. And this stone, if you spend a lot of time with them and they make you feel good a lot, the stone will get very warm. It'll cool down very slowly because it's a big stone. So the thing is, if that person goes away, when they come back a lot later, the love hasn't changed. The love is still the same because it's a little cooler because they've been away for a while, but it still retains a lot of heat. Whereas for us, love is almost an abstract idea. We experience the feeling of it in real time, but I don't have any conception of, like, when people say, "Did you miss me?" The answer is always no. It's not because I don't value them. It's not because I don't love them. Sometimes occasionally the answer is yes. Like, you know, if I'm away from Kimberly for a long time, I will miss her, and I'll say something like, "I missed you today. You know, I was away from you for too long." But Kimberly and I see a lot of each other. I'm not having a Kim shortage. She's not having an Eric shortage. So, but the good news is, regardless, it's like those pebbles, the heat from them, it doesn't impact us but sporadically. And if it impacts us more than sporadically, it disables us, kind of. So you'll be sort of disabled in the spurts of new love, where for ESTP anyway, I get kind of frantic when I'm starting a new relationship because I have no clue of how to. It's like, okay, let's define ourselves as in love so that I know how to feel.
Let's get straight to it. No chaser.
Right.
And that's what he did.
Mm-hmm. Does it cause problems? Yeah, potentially it causes some problems. Few problems.
So yeah, for the most part, Fi PoLR can be very useful in that you'll find yourself at least understanding yourself to be clear-headed in times that could make other people cloudy or have more difficult in judgment. I think that's more of a perceptional thing than an actual reality, but it's useful. So I'm okay with it. I don't really. I think that discovering that I was Fi PoLR actually just made a lot of pieces of my own understanding of self fit together. And in that way, it was a good thing for me and not a bad thing. And I think that especially as it relates to feeling types that I've spoken to, there's kind of this stigma against Fi PoLR, but there really shouldn't be. Doesn't really maladaptively affect many people other than like you not knowing where you stand with someone else or not realizing when you've pushed something too far. And if you have the right people around you, they'll just communicate that to you.
And we have just as much loyalty, if not more, than Fi people, despite the fact that it's not from the heat of a stone. Because what it is from the weight of SI, whatever the analogy would support there, logs, SI logs, that are also, they have their own kind of weight, you know, and are important. So my past is very important to me. It's important that I revisit things that have occurred in the past periodically, because if I don't revisit them, they seem gone forever, and I feel completely untethered and like loose into the world. Now, here's one thing that I think ESTP probably differs from ENTP a bit. ENTP with Fi PoLR is going to just in general be more word based. Like, I'm going to interpret your FE. I'm going to glean FE data about your FI mostly from language and words and auditory shit. Whereas I think ESTPs in general can glean data from both fields of data more successfully. So I think in general their FE is better than ENTP's FE, at least in terms of reading. Becky disagrees. I'm not necessarily sure in terms of pudding, but in terms of reading, in the moment, you know. But I think take exception with it.
I think with their valuing of SE in the first slot, they're also more inclined to have different, unique ways to show their feelings without expression. And that's to say that I think that when they're interacting with other people, where we're playing with ideas all the time, they're actually doing things. And so those things that they're doing in the world can manifest as something more tangible for people.
Like whipping out their dick?
No, I meant like doing the lawn maintenance and like different things like that. If there's a part of the house that needs to be fixed, they'll probably eventually get around to doing it if they think it's fun. And we'll do it our own way if it's fun, but it's not going to be the way that keeps it fixed forever.
One thing I was thinking today about SE and NI in general, which I think is relevant, is they're both elements of timing, and it explains why it's difficult to talk about SE being a follow-through function and an opportunist function. They're both elements of timing. SE says, I have the presence in the moment to know when opportunity presents itself and I need to pull the trigger. But NI says I know when stepping back and making a sort of knowledge-based decision about timing that's not tethered at the moment, but instead across time. That's NI. So it's like they're two kinds of the same thing, of timing issues. And so when I say SE is about follow through and it's also about opportunism, well, SENI is about opportunism and follow through on executing a single idea. And so you can't get to the NI singularity of it unless you execute all of it. I can't have a pond unless I do all the steps to it. Like right now I have to pull out the fucking bottom pond, put some cement down because this fucking stupid design idea I had, my TE failed me again. And regardless, the point is I'm still going to do the SENI part of it. I'm going to complete the single vision that I have, which is two layered ponds. And
Kimberly's gonna keep her mouth shut completely.
Always wise. And that's a timing thing. It's like I need to realize how much time it's going to take to complete the task, and I need to be prepared for me doing it wrong 3 times first, of course, because that's just how I do shit. But if you're an SE person, that's easier. You're not going to do it wrong 3 times first. It's somewhat a TE issue, but it's really a vision issue. I don't have a singular vision going into it, so of course I'm going to fuck it up. Right? So that's the thing about SENI. It's timing and singularity. And that affords you a different kind of relationship with Fi PoLR than it does either Becky or I. Taylor would probably have some insight into that. My take on Taylor is he's more distant from his FI than either Becky or I. Would you agree with that, Becky?
Definitely.
Susie, you know all 3 of us. Would you agree with that as well?
Yes.
Now, is Taylor representative of ESTPs? I don't know. Maybe Wiz Sauce is more representative of ESTPs. Wiz Sauce seems a little moister.
Anyone?
Shrugs. Are you guys willing to sign my petition on legalizing shrugs?
Okay.
Oh, totally.
Okay, good. Because my advocacy is that the shrug, it should not be considered the modest, simple shrug, the provincial shrug. It should be considered the majestic shrug.
Well, no, sometimes I really want to shrug, but I feel like it's, number one, it's something that nobody does.
People frown on.
Number two, and number two, you're right. Like, my shrugs have weight to them, and I feel like that weight won't be acknowledged.
Pearls before swine. So, if you want to see a nation where we have more regal, more majestic, more proud, more noble, more effervescent shrugging, then vote Strauss 2020. God bless America, and don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.